There we go. To Terry and their team to share with us round 2 of trauma. Thanks for being here with us again today.
Thanks, Krista. So good morning, everybody. My name's Terry from Chena, as you know, and Lynn Calnans is here as well, Stephanie White. And we're going to continue our conversation that we started Monday. We were talking a lot about the theory of everything regard to trauma and our current situation, COVID, and other situations that are happening in our world. So we're going to move forward talking a little more about, okay, what do we do? How do we approach this? And something to keep in mind is that there is not a curriculum. A lot of times when people say, well, SEL, what's the curriculum? It's there are curriculums out there that support and do things, but when we talk about trauma in schools, being trauma informed, there's no curriculum. It's a mindset. And that's what we want to talk about is our mindset and those type of things going forward and things that we can do to change our mindset and think about things. It's how we look at how we approach the day. And it's the lens that we look at things as opposed to a curriculum and things. So there are suggestions of like how to think about things, what to consider. There's nothing to say this is what you do. You got to find what works best for you and keeping these things in your mind as you go forward. So with that, we'll get started.
All right. So, when we're looking at our upcoming school year, I was thinking, it really relates back to me to those times of those choose your own adventure books. Except it seems where every possible ending, we're either gonna get sucked into a pit of snakes, or we may get taken away in a UFO, to another planet. So, just thinking about again, there are a lot of unknowns with what our future is looking like. And I know, Stephanie, you wanted to talk about how just right now our COVID-19 experiences are very much like those stages of grieving.
They are. And actually, I got this information from David Kessler. He's a grief expert. And I was listening to a podcast this summer with he and Brene Brown. And it just really resonated with me on, this is where we are. And this is where so many of our kids are going to be. So when you look at the different stages of grief, you've got, you start with your denial and you go to anger. And I don't know about you guys, but when this all first started, I was like, nope, schools aren't closing. I am not staying in my house for days on end, let alone weeks on end. Nope, not happening. This is not going to affect me. And so I was like, wow, I really did go through that one too. And anger, as soon as my favorite events or concerts that I had upcoming or trips that I was going to be doing started getting canceled, man, that anger started coming out. And so this relates to us adults and the kids that we're going to be seeing as well. So keep that in mind. And then you get into the bargaining stage, and that went on in my house with a lot of things. Well, I can do this, I can't do that, but if I'm really good this time, then maybe I can go and do, that other thing. And you go through that, and then you go through the depression state, which, COVID hit so many adults with that, as well as, we saw the rise in the mental health. The statistics for depression had increased significantly. Our kids are going to be going through that too. They're losing their support systems. They're losing the people that they get to come to school every day that they know unconditionally care about them. And then we kind of reach that acceptance state where some days that's easier than others. We don't live in that state by any means. Some days it's easier than others to say, okay, you know what, we do need to do this, or this is reality. Other days, that's still really hard, and we jump right back to that denial stage, especially as they put more and more restrictions out, or as we've loosened up a little bit, then we have to tighten back up. So it's never you're in those in order. You can be in any of those stages of grief during this time, but at some point or other, every adult and every one of our students has hit those stages. And so I thought it was a great just comparison to keep in mind of not everyone's going to be in the same. When we come back to school, not everyone is going to have gone through all stages, and not everyone is going to come to accept every stage. So some definitely can still be stuck in that denial or that anger. I think we're going to see a significant amount stuck in depression and going back there. As school, if in the terrible event that we start and then we have to pull back again, we're going to see that again too. So, and not everyone is accepting of it at all. So some still haven't even reached that stage. So something really important, I think, to keep in the back of your minds of, where maybe you are and where your students that you're working with, and maybe you and that student aren't in the same state, And so it might be, you maybe need one of those moments where you tap out to somebody else to get some help with that student, because maybe in the different stages that you're not meshing well. So keep that in mind.
I think it's important to keep in mind too that we'll bounce through those stages at different times. As yesterday when I came in and I told Lynn, I was like, I feel defeated today. I just feel defeated for whatever reasons. Maybe it's because we just had a 2-hour admin meeting. I don't know, but I was feeling very defeated yesterday. And think about this. When we talk about grief, we talk about things like when somebody loses somebody in their family to death. That next year there was those year first, the first celebration without that person, the first those anniversaries of those things. Same thing's kind of happening here at school. At the end of the school year, kids lost sports. They lost a lot of activities. They've lost things over the summer. Maybe those kids to go to camp or to the fairs, to all those things that happened over the summer that have been canceled. And as we come back to school, although we're going to try to make it resemble what it was previously, it's not going to be the same. There's going to be some things, again, that we're not going to be able to do, and are there going to be sports and all those things? There's going to be these things that kids are going to potentially feel some loss again going forward, even though we're back in school, back in session together, and we need to be aware of these things going forward.
And I think that's really important, where that family aspect we talked about on Monday comes in, working through these stages as a family, letting them know you're here for them. It's near impossible to get through grief without some sort of support system. And a lot of times that support system is your family and your community. So remembering that you are the family and the community for those kids, and they may be going through all these with no one to help guide them and support them. And now they finally have you back, and it's your time to help them understand what they're going through.
And just to kind of add to that, I think the key part of that acceptance stage is that acceptance doesn't mean that we're okay with it or that things are okay. It just means that we've reached a point where we're comfortable and that we can function in this new area, this new life. When somebody that we love passes away, we're not okay with it, but we reach a point where we can move forward with our life and be able to continue on achieving things that we want to achieve. For us to reach acceptance in this new school year, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be our ideal. There are going to be many things that we're going to be frustrated with or, not happy with, but it doesn't mean that we can't still be comfortable living with those unknowns. And also, we need to give ourselves grace. And I hear that a lot. Like, we cannot expect perfection from ourselves. There are going to be mistakes. If, many of us are thrust to be these virtual teachers, and we've never been trained to do that before. And yet it seems like every social media commenter out there knows exactly what it means to be a perfect virtual teacher. In fact, they know how to teach even without virtually. So I'm ready to employ all of them to just go and educate our kids out there. Everybody out there seems to know how to do our job better than us right now. And we can either get overwhelmed and we can drown in those thoughts, or we can pull back and just, I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. I may miss an email. I may say something wrong when I'm live streaming my instruction out onto these webcams, but whatever those plans are that you might be having with your district, but ultimately accepting that there are going to be mistakes made and it's okay. So, giving yourselves that forgiveness to be human and make mistakes is so important as we move forward. I think this is a huge part that we have to be recognizing, that there are just going to be strong emotions ahead of us. Anytime that we're in periods of transition, people do tend to kind of be more isolated. They may struggle, especially in these times, because we have been more isolated. We haven't necessarily had those support systems that Stephanie and Terry were talking about. And ultimately, though, I think the biggest piece of this is, like, if we don't allow our time for our kids and ourselves and our coworkers to process those feelings and have time to put voice to those feelings, to be able to label those feelings and communicate them out in the best way that they know how to, and then help them communicate them out in a more appropriate way, we're going to be working in a building where we just have like little bombs going off all the time, because those feelings are going to come out. They're just going to come out in the most unhealthy way possible. And I feel like this quote really speaks to that. If you suppress the feelings and push people to get over them, you'll be handicapped with people who have never mended. And so thinking about, we could be, if we don't allow time for our students to process what has happened, ourselves and our coworkers, we're going to be working with a lot of people who are just really not healthy and well in that whole person being.
And that goes back to on Monday, we talked about if we don't address it right away, we're going to continually be dealing with it all year. And we will be. I mean, doesn't go away. We know that trauma does not go away. But if you don't address it, like Lynn said, it's going to be constantly coming up and going through. They haven't had somebody most likely to talk to them and tell them how they're feeling is okay and process through it. So now's their time to get that opportunity if you allow it. This one is huge, and I love that we got this quote in here. No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. We talked about that a little bit on Monday, and pretty much any training that if you hear any of us talk, we talk about this. There has got to be a relationship. We talked on Monday that 2/3 of the nation's youth state they don't have a caring, significant adult in their life, and so now it's your time to be that person. And you're not going to be that person for every single kid. Connection, you don't connect that way with every single kid, but every person in your building should connect with a kid or more. So if it's not you, there needs to be somebody. You know, in our school here, it's our secretary, it's our custodian, it's our cook. Everybody has a relationship with different kiddos in different ways here, and so finding that connection for that kid, so that they do feel comfortable talking and they do feel that they can come to you when things aren't going well, and that they can just be open and honest, and you're going to love them unconditionally.
Yeah, and research shows that overcoming trauma, it's one significant adult is the key factor there, and that's where for us it comes in huge. And a priority needs to be making those relationships, remaking those connections, reestablishing your school community when we get back in the buildings is going to be crucial for our students to gain, not only emotionally but as well as academically once we get the year going.
So
One of the
I'm so sorry, Steph.
I was just going to add one last thing. One of the things that I also had learned about the summer that I thought was great was that those relationships are what foster the dialogues. And so if you want to talk, if you want a kid to open up to you, sitting there and just saying, you can tell me, no, you can talk to me, let's talk, that's not going to do it. If they don't know you and they don't know that you authentically care about them, they're not going to open up no matter how many times you say, no, yeah, you can talk to me. So relationships foster dialogue. Keep in the back of your minds.
And I was just going to say that as we move into talking more about like different ideas and strategies to support our kids as we head back to the classroom, just thinking that none of these are the end all be all. I like to think of trauma-informed care as like a recipe. You can follow a recipe exactly, but there are still going to be people who don't like the final product. Everybody adds their own seasonings. If I tend to like my things a little bit more garlicky, so I add a little bit more garlic. My husband, he loves hot sauce, so he's adding like death by peppers all the time to his foods. When it comes to being trauma informed, there's no script to follow. There's no, as Terry mentioned before, there's no specific curriculum that's going to work. It truly is just picking and choosing the parts of the recipe that we know that we can most authentically communicate out and share with our kids, so that we can be our best self with our students to connect with them. It's based more off principles versus rules. And that's where it gets tricky for people, because it's easier to follow something when you have, this is exactly what I do, this is exactly how I do it, this is how it goes. Sometimes it's tricky when we have to kind of figure out, okay, this is the principle, how do I take my own unique spin to it and then make it my own? And so again, some of these things that we're going to talk about, you'll think like, oh, this is a great idea, this will work in my classroom, or I can see myself doing this. Some of these things that we're going to talk about, you're going to be like, there's no way in all 7 layers of hell that I could ever make this work in my classroom. and that's okay, because maybe there's something else that would work in yours. So these are some of the things that we experienced with our students and that we implemented with our students that we found to be successful. I hope that you're willing to be as, you know, out of the box thinking and move into those next levels to try things too. So
I think it's important that when we end up in that virtual, if we end up in a remote type learning situation again, for those students that there are certain students that we all know that need our support more than others. And depending on what your format may look like in that situation, those are the kids that even no matter what if it's an every other day meeting, whatever it might look like, there are some kids who need daily contact. And we need to make sure that happens somehow, whether it be even a text or a voicemail, just that daily, hey, just checking in on you today. We try to connect with every one of our students every day. If they didn't join us in a Zoom meeting in the spring, that we were calling, we were sending a text, we were sending an email, trying to make some sort of connection with every student every day. Of course, all of our students come from a traumatic background, for the majority of them. And but for those kids in the districts that we know have those, it's going to be so crucial if we end up in a remote learning situation to attempt to have a daily contact of some sort with that student, to let them know that, hey, I'm still here, I still care, and we're gonna help you through this the best we can.
And so increasing that communication, and trying to be creative with how you do it. One of the things that was really worked well for our building was we created a Google Classroom that became our virtual school building. And so every kid, because they do have a school email address, they were able to, from our kinders to our, plus seniors, they were able to log in, and we would send out announcements, we would send out blasts, I would, send out funny pictures. We basically considered that to be like the hallway of our building, and it was a way for our school to have a community online. Initially, I kind of blocked students from being able to respond and comment because I was hesitant about what could have come out and what students would say. I slowly started creeping back on that, and then had students being able to, interact with and respond to. And I still remember it was one of my highlights of the whole experience is I had put a post out there just saying, miss you guys. We wish we could see your faces, and one of our students who's more of a loner put out something like, I really miss everybody too. I don't like being at home. And this was of course 3 a.m. when most of our students operate, but so I didn't see this right away, but another student of ours did. And they had this very beautiful back and forth, quick messages, hey, don't be sad. You have a lot of people that care about you. And then, hey, thanks. I needed that. And then a really weird cat picture, because apparently that's how most of our kids communicate, is through memes. So, then there was a weird little cat picture, but it was just when I woke up the next morning, it was probably the best thing that I could have, had in that moment, because I saw our kids having a conversation and communication that they would have maybe had in a school building, but it was done virtually. And that kid who was feeling lost in that moment had someone there. So, thinking about how you can create that sense of community in a virtual world.
I think for us, one of mine, creating the Google Voice numbers for us was huge too. That way then the kids weren't getting our personal cell phone numbers, which, I appreciate. And there's the option to turn off notifications. And so I didn't have to get messages or calls from them 24/7. I could set parameters to that. But even this summer, some of the kids, my junior high girl who would normally come into the building and tell you everything good and bad that went on, want to share the fun things that she's doing, has been randomly sending messages and will send me a video or send me, maybe something fun she's done or some pictures. And it's a real quick, she sends me, I send back a, hey, great to hear from you. But it keeps that connection so that when the time comes that they do come back in the building, that you still have that groundwork. You still have something. You're not starting from scratch with a lot of these kids that have had no positive interactions for so many months. So that was one of my favorite features that, I encourage you to look into in the future.
I think a big thing is making sure to, bring your other support staff, your specials, your social workers, your counselors, making sure that they can be part of any type of that communication. Because, again, our kids connect with different people in different ways, and they need to have those opportunities to have those moments and connections with those other staff as well. And it's important for those other staff to be a part of. So, thinking about a building or district-wide schedule of if you're going to end up doing, video conferencing through Zoom or Meets or whatever, but how you can make sure that you can provide so that those people are getting access to those meetings and can be a part of them. And another thing too is, and I know we talked about this on Monday a little bit, like, don't just cut out. We have to be replacing. So thinking about, like, how can we do this? How can we make this work? And I know we got into the conversation on Monday, like, how can we make an assembly work? And there was a really great suggestion from one of the participants about, like, we'll just have everybody stay in their classrooms and the principal can Zoom that assembly for everybody to be a part of. So we don't just want to keep cutting back on the different things that make a school building special. We want to figure out how we can do that in a better way. So we may not be able to do a hug, but maybe we can do an air high five. We can do a whoosh, if you ever have heard of the whooshes, that's a really fun way to celebrate, and it's touch free. We may not be able to give a candy award, but maybe we can let kids pick out a really cool sticker. Like, there are ways to replace. We just have to be willing to kind of think outside the box for that. So there was others. I know that there was also concerns about just facial expressions because, for so many of us, our kids read our facial expressions, and that's a way that they kind of tell feelings. They're pretty intuitive and perceptive in that. For some people, actually wearing the mask may be helpful, if you have a little bit of a, resting bleep face. But for most of us, it is going to be a hindrance. And so there's just, some things to really think about. There are those options of clear masks out there. And I know that many people are afraid because, they make me look so weird, or I'm really, self-conscious about how that's gonna look. We got to get over some of that ourselves. And again, knowing that we're more resistant to anything different, wearing a mask is different for us in general. So if I'm going to have to wear a clear face mask and that's going to make it better for my kids to see how I'm really feeling and see my smile, I'm going to wear that clear mask. And, so thankfully I know here at Chena, we're going to be wearing a lot of those here in our building. The other cue that we can take is from the medical world. There are a lot of nurses out there that have also expressed concern, doctors that have expressed concern about how they can communicate their facial expressions and their, to be less scary to their patients. And, this is a good example. There's nurses out there that are just wearing little buttons or, pictures on their scrubs that show their face in a smile. And so again, it just kind of adds that more humane, that humane approach to, this is who I am. I'm the face behind the mask.
Your tone of voice is going to be huge in this one too. I think, definitely when you're speaking to them, maybe having to go above and beyond what you normally would with your tone and how you say things, almost accentuate them more than what you normally would, just to make sure you get that point across. So, obviously I am a person who I struggle to hear. I read lips. These masks, man, they have made it hard for me. But if somebody is able to just accentuate the way they say something and that other body language, your other senses are going to pick up when one sense starts to lose. So I lose the sense of being able to see their mouths moving, but I then, my increase of being able to see body language and what I can hear in their tone increases. So our kids are going to be the same way. They're going to be more receptive to hearing, happy tones and knowing, where before they used to maybe just look at a smile and a frown. Now they're going to be able to adjust and recognize, oh, that sounded like an angry tone, or that sounded like a happy tone, or their shoulders slumped, or their shoulders went up. They must be, happy, whatever that might be. Their other senses are going to pick up on that.
And I think that's where gestures and movements and body movement, maybe exaggerating them at this time without being able to see a facial expression. When you're excited about something, using more hand movement or moving around the room or something like that. So being more cognizant of those type of things that we just do normally. But yeah, with us losing our facial expressions as part of it, adding in some other things may be something to keep in mind as you go forward also in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And I know on Monday, there was also somebody that talked about not being able to have those circles and having the groups of students together to have those conversations. In the lower left of the screen, I believe, the lower left of the screen, you can see that this is what I was talking about. So a teacher created their picture classroom of their students that, had little discussions, and then it was on a bulletin board, and she would move them in and out, depending on the need for it. So it was a great way to represent, hey, we're still all together in a way. So it does create that sense. And then kind of going back to basics, how do we connect in a virtual world is often very similar to how we would have connected before. Incorporating student preferences and interest, asking for, their thoughts. Maybe I don't know how the procedure is for a kid to get up and sharpen a pencil right now, because before I just would have had them get up and walk through the whole group of desks and go sharpen their pencil. I don't know what that's going to look like. So maybe let's talk as a class and figure out what's our class procedure for how to safely sharpen a pencil, and giving the students a chance to kind of have that opportunity to have a voice for it, because if they feel like they've had that opportunity, they're going to be more inclined to following that. We know that when people, that's based off very basic research, when people feel like they've had a say in something, they're going to be more inclined to participate in that. Really important that we're thinking about just physically and emotionally safe classrooms. We know that kids cannot be in that social engagement or that learning mode, that ready to learn, if they're feeling a sense of being threatened. And we have to recognize that sometimes those feelings and perceptions of threat or unsafe, not being safe, can come in ways that we wouldn't normally perceive them to be. So making sure that your classroom is very sensory aware. So really think about your lighting, really think about your textures in the classroom, thinking about what kind of supportive materials you're going to have, making sure that your visuals are meaningful and appropriate. We also, just for safety too, we want to make sure that our classrooms aren't cluttered right now. And I know that that's hard because don't look behind me at my office. But we tend to be a little bit of pack rats as teachers. We tend to make sure that we have something, because you never know when we just might need it. Unfortunately, right now, we really need to kind of pare back the visual clutter, because not only is that just one more thing that we may have to sanitize, or one more thing that a kid may touch, but visual clutter for kids can also, especially kids with trauma, can actually lead to feelings of threat or perceptions of not being safe, because it will help their brain, or unfortunately hinder their brain in feeling more scattered and unorganized. So just thinking about, how we want to make sure that our classrooms and the areas that we set up are not only meeting those guidelines that we have to for the CDC, but then also are supportive to our learners.
And
I think I'm sorry. And when we talk about the celebrations and rituals, there were a lot of things that we lost at the end of the school year that we weren't able to do. and looking forward, like, okay, what are our beginning of the year rituals and those type of things? And now how can we adjust those so maybe we can do those still or in a different way, as well as looking at the celebrations and rituals. What new ones can we come up with in this new way of learning that we're doing right now, and create some new things that maybe they'll continue to be things in the future also. So it's just a matter of thinking through those. Okay, at the beginning of the year, I've always done this with my kids. Wow, I can't do it that way, but is there another way that we can do it? And just try to really think about those things so you can incorporate as many of those rituals that are part of your routine and daily activities and everything that you've always done, but how can you incorporate them now? And even for those kids who might be on that remote learning, so they have that experience also. How can I do this in that remote world to recreate that same type of feeling? So this is something you just got to think about, and then create new routines as appropriate going forward, and practice those things. You know, even the small little things like sharpening a pencil, that's something, especially with our young ones, we need to teach it, relearn it, teach it, and keep practicing those things so it just becomes part of the new routine.
One thing is, you know, if you're giving options for kids to learn virtually as well as be in-person classroom, we want to make sure that our virtual learners are feeling included and a part of. And so one of the ways that I had seen out there that I thought was a really creative solution was even just, you know, having a space for that person in the room with their picture, you know, so that the other students that are in-person instruction still know that, hey, you know, Stephanie may be learning at home, but she's still a part of our classroom. Because the last thing you want is, when this is all past us, we don't want Stephanie to eventually return to in-person school and feel like she's never been a part of the school or hasn't been a part of the school for the past 8 months to a year. We still want her to feel included. So how can we, you know, reserve that space for her, have that visual talk about, you know, I don't just have 10 students in my classroom, or I don't just have 25 students in my classroom. I have 30 kids, but just 5 of them are virtually learning right now. And so just really thinking about how you're even wording things to your students so that they know that we are still a class of a large group of kids. We're just all learning in different ways right now, and that's okay.
I really like that idea. Just the idea of, I think we're trying to figure out how we're going to build community within our classrooms, but the idea that we really need to be cognizant of ensuring that we're bringing those remote learners in as well, that maybe by second semester we might be all together. So we want to make sure that we're building that community in each setting. So that was something I had not thought of. Thank you.
So this is kind of that time old, you know, we are going to have a lot of new things and new changes and new procedures. I mean, we were even talking the other day, like, we're going to have to teach the kids how to walk down the hallway. You know, we're going to have to teach our 18-year-old kids how to walk down our hallway in our building. And they've walked down that hallway for, you know, practically 10 years of their life. But there's a lot of things that are going to be new for our kids when it comes to how we even do school. And so all of us are going to have to get on our preschool and kindergarten teacher hats right now. And we're going to have to go back to those basics of we're going to have to Groundhog Day style it. We are going to teach and reteach and then reteach those procedures. And then we're going to do it again and again and again. Because even though a kid, you know, may think they know how to walk down the hallway, and they may know that, okay, well, there's that line and we have to walk a certain way on this side and walk a certain way on that side. It still is something new, and they're going to slip back to their comfort zone, and their comfort zone is what they're used to. So we have to make sure that they are really well practiced and have that modeling, have that teaching on repeat about all these new procedures and expectations. And we can't just expect that they have read the 67-page documents that have gone out about the building procedures. In fact, I was fielding phone calls this morning. We sent out like a 2-page, really summarized, bulleted point plan. And then parents just had to choose whether they were virtual learners or whether they were in-person learners. And I'm still having to clarify and walk those through that with our parents. And you know, this morning I had to take the survey for several of them because they couldn't even, you know, figure out how to click on the link and click their choice. So you know, these are things that we're working through with our parents. It's a new time for a lot of different things, and all of those stipulations, like washing their hands every time they leave and exit a classroom, we're going to have to practice that. And we're going to need to remember to put time in our schedule and our day for those things.
I just got to give a shout out here then while you're talking. I was putting the chat about that 67-page document. If we put it into memes, they'll actually read it. So I don't think you saw that. That was brilliant. I'm not sure who put that out there. I just saw that. That's great. We may use that in the future. So thank you.
Well, there is a reason why memes are so popular, and a lot of it is because they are visual. So, I mean, that is actually a really great strategy, is how can you take some of those procedures that we're going to have to follow and put them into sarcastic visual supports, aka memes. But how could you do that? Because you're right, kids would probably actually do it, maybe their parents, but kids might, if you do it in that way.
Well, and we talk about this later on, so I won't get too into it, but you know, a meme is an 8-second thing, so they can focus on an 8-second item.
Right.
But with the, when you keep in mind with the routines and stuff, Lynn, when you were talking, it was coming to my head, it takes 14 days, research shows, to change a habit. And so when you figure these kids have year after year, you know, they know what to do if they need to sharpen their pencil, go to the bathroom, you know, get a scratch piece of paper for their math work, whatever it is, they're in that routine. So it's not only you add on, you know, more complex things now they have to do, but basic 14 days to change that habit. So over and over and over again, at least for 14 days before it maybe starts to resonate the new way.
And be prepared for this is stupid. We already did this. Like, I already know how to do this, you know, but yet it's still the kid that doesn't know how to walk the path to go sharpen their pencil. You know, remembering, going back to that, anything new or change is a threat to the survival response, that kids are going to be more resistant to it. Ourselves, we're more resistant to it. We're probably going to have more negative, unexpected responses. And guys, maybe we do a lot of teaching kids about their brains and how their brains function. Very first day of school, it might be a really great thing to show the kids some of these, you know, some of these slides, or, you know, your interpretation of some of these slides, and say like, hey, this is how our brain reacts to things that are new. Our brain has been in a survival state for all of us. I'm not picking on anybody in here, for all of us for the last 6 months. Therefore, we're going to be more, you know, hesitant and more contradictory and more negative about anything new and unexpected. So, you know, having those really open, honest conversations with kids, and you can do that all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade, because we do that here, about how our brain leads to really strong emotions and how it can react to, you know, to negative situations. So again, that would be a really good thing to do first day of school. Like, we got a lot of new things to learn about just how to be a school and how to be a student in a time of COVID. Let's talk about how the brain reacts to learning new things, especially when we're in more of those hypo or hyper aroused states. Terry, I know you feel really passionate about accommodations not just being for kids with special ed. I think this kind of speaks to you.
Yeah, we need to think about that. You know, coming up through the special education ranks as a school psychologist in my prior life before I went to the dark side of administration, and you know, now living where I am at here, it's whenever we think about accommodations and things like that, people always think, well, that's for kids, especially these are different learners. It's not. All of our kids need some type of accommodations, and now more so than ever going forward, we really need to be thinking about this and about every student coming in the door, no matter what their background is, no matter what their skills are. Some accommodations are going to be necessary for kids, and we need to be thinking about those. Think about how are we providing our instruction, and you know, different ways and using different modalities. It's crucial for those learners, because if we end up having to go back to that remote, we want to make sure that they have had experience with all the different ways we may need to use in a remote situation. So using those things in the classroom going forward now, I think, are going to be crucial. providing, as on here, providing those examples of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. That was a big thing that we had with our kids when we went to remote. They were just like, well, I looked at it. Is that good enough? No, you have to actually do the work. They would click, they would submit things back to us with nothing on it. Like, did you do this? Well, yeah, it says I looked at it. No, you're still learning. You're supposed to be participating in our education. And so we had to go back, show them, this is what it would look like completed. Oh, well, that's what I do in school. Yes, you are in school. You know, this isn't, we're not on summer yet. And some of our kids felt that way. Breaking things down step by step and walking them through those steps. And then that repeat, just like we were saying that last slide, we're going to have to go over those things. Providing strategies for them. And if we end up in remote learning, the more strategies and organizational skills that we can try to give to kids while we have them face to face, hopefully that'll carry over into the next setting. Because when they're going to have to be more on their own with trying to organize those things as we give them and provide them to them. And, you know, looking at how kids are responding across the board, you know, and given into a virtual situation, what is acceptable and what is not. What is, when you get into the meat of what you're trying to teach and what they're trying to learn and what your goals are, maybe what they gave you, even though, yeah, it wasn't written the best and everything, but man, did they get it? And if they got it, is that okay in these situations, and be accepting of that and thinking about those things as we're moving forward. It's, you need to think about those accommodations across the board for everybody, even our brightest learners and from the best homes. We need to be thinking about those things for them, because even though those kids that are at the top of that, even though they, you know, like a lot of us, we present okay and all those things, but deep down in our level, are we really okay? And there are times that we're not. We just aren't. And these students are going to be in that same boat, and we need to be willing to adjust for them accordingly, depending where they're at that time and place.
And looking at our remote learners too on that, Terry, are they giving the best they can with the resources that they have? You know, given their home environments, are they giving the best that they can with maybe no support at home or disruptions? You know, think an example, we had a step parent who wouldn't allow them to charge their computer. So are they giving the best they can in the amount of time their computer lasted on a battery for that day? So just keeping that in mind on what's going on at home and what that child truly can produce while in that home environment, especially our 100% remote learners, when they are there 100% of the time. What kind of adversities are they facing in that home in regards to their work?
You know, and thinking about, you know, that background too, and those kids in that situation. We had a young lady, and this was devastating for us, because we were looking in the living room. You know, when we were doing remote learning, we had kids on Zoom, and we're teaching. We're seeing their house. We're seeing what's happening. And one of our young ladies who does a pretty good job here at school, but was struggling in remote learning and things like that. And the whole time that this particular day, the step parent was in the background just swearing and cussing at her about, what are you doing right now? Who the F are you talking to? Just continuously. She goes, I'm chatting with my teacher. Well, you shouldn't be chatting. And then we had to explain to her, no, say that you're in your class. But he said, he was like, I don't give, and just, it was terrible. And that went on for a half hour, you know, and that was one small snippet we had in her life. We knew her life was like that, but we got to see it firsthand. And we need to have those things in mind. And there are times like, you know, what she did today was okay. We, you know, because it was a bad situation. And we know that. And we need to be thinking about those things for some of our students. As Steph said, are they giving the best they can with what they got and the support they have? And we need to be thinking about those things going forward.
And that also leads to thinking about, you know, what kind of technology and equipment do they have available for them? You know, I know many schools are moving to one-to-one with Chromebooks, you know, but still that may be one Chromebook per family, not necessarily one Chromebook per student. One of the big things that really kind of opened my eyes was how many of our students were working off of smartphones to do their assignments. And so I sat there and I thought about it for a little bit, like even just thinking about toggling back and forth between various screens. Like if my teacher wants me to read something on this screen and then toggle back to this document so that I can actually answer the questions, think about what that's like on a smartphone. On a computer, it's super easy. But on a smartphone, it is not necessarily easy. In fact, on a computer, I can minimize two windows, and I can even have that text right next to the questions. On a smartphone, I'm sure you can, but I can't do it. But that's really difficult, or it just becomes really small. So even accessing Google Drive off of a smartphone is much more complicated than it is off of a laptop or even a larger tablet. So really being aware of the content and how we're delivering it, maybe we need to make sure that we take a long passage and put it on one document and then break it up and put the questions inside of the text. So they read a paragraph and then the question that I want them to answer is right next to that paragraph, and then a little bit more text, and then another question, and then a little bit more text. Because that way, if they are working off of a smartphone, they have it all there on one screen. Another big pet peeve of mine was worksheets, PDF worksheets, sending out PDF worksheets. Our kids do not have printers. In fact, I'll be honest, I did not have a printer until I finally went out and bought one during this time, because I realized I needed a printer at home. Most of our kids do not have printers at home. So thinking that they're going to know how to edit a PDF, or how they're going to print off a PDF, do the worksheet, scan it back in, and then email it to to their teachers, that's really complicated. And most of our kids are going to shut down before they can even think about the steps that it takes to do that. So how can I make this document, how can I make this work editable so that kids can actually access it? Another thing that we really recognized was and I saw it in my own daughter, every day when she's at school and she's working on a Chromebook, they would just open their Chromebook and she would click log in with Google for whatever website the teacher wanted her to go on in. Log in with Google, which was really handy until we were at home and we didn't even have I didn't really know her username or her password to even log in with Google. And so then it became, I had to reach out and make sure that, we found out what her email address, what her password was. She's in 3rd grade, but what that was, because I'm sure she's done it at school maybe 100 times, but to generalize that to home and be able to do it at home, that was a challenge. She's never had to do that at home. So just making sure that your kids have usernames and passwords in an easy, accessible way. Practice logging in, not just logging in with Google. Practice, going to that website when we have as much time with them, because they're just not going to be able to generalize those simple things, from one step to the other.
I think another thing to keep in mind too, with kids using their smartphone, that's what they're comfortable with, because that's what they do 24/7. So they would rather do that than use a computer. And we need to make sure that, like, hey, when you're doing your schoolwork, you need to do it on your computer like you would at school, and try to teach that and reinforce that. So when they're home, they're doing it that same way. Because most of these kids, the minute they walk out our doors, they're on that cell phone and doing their smartphone, doing everything. They do everything that way. And it's like, well, I'm just going to do it on this because this is what I like and this is what I'm used to. And we need to encourage them and teach them that this is going to help you be more successful in maneuvering our virtual world and going forward, and encouraging them to do that. And also I think it'll help, when I sat in some of our classes here in the spring, I got seasick sometimes because that kid's got his cell phone he's Zooming with, and I've been in 15 rooms and I didn't even know their house was that big. It was like, man, can you just sit down for 5 minutes? Because I'm gonna puke. This is getting bad. And but so trying to, and that's going to help them in learning too, if we get them to engage for a certain amount of time, as opposed to moving around doing other things, which is very easy to do with their hand device or their smartphones.
A big piece about oh, sorry, I'm getting feedback, but a big piece about, those online learning is that we need to make sure that we're providing quality feedback. And I know that you guys at the ROE have been really focusing in on feedback and ensuring that students are getting that really in the moment, that it actually focuses on what the outcome is, like what your learning outcome, that intention of learning. making sure that the student understands what they are doing incorrectly or what they are doing correctly, providing some ideas or examples or strategies to help them so that they can improve. And then just ultimately, and this is what we do all the time, just know where we want them, having the students know where they want to go with it. So what is the learning goal? Going back to what Terry mentioned earlier, yeah, on Google Classroom, we had a lot of kids, like the teacher would kick back the assignment to the kid, and the kid would then just like resubmit. And then the teacher would get the same assignment, and then the teacher would kick it back, like needs work. And the kid would like kick it back, like, okay, I looked at it, that required work, so then the teacher would like, needs more work, kick it back, like, and it became like this endless cycle. And I'm like, you're not providing specific feedback. You need to let them know what needs work. What are you expecting? Do you have a model example of what you want the final outcome to look like? Like, those are all steps that we may naturally do in the classroom, but during virtual learning, some of us did forget that stuff. So we need to go back to those really core concepts of teaching and make sure that we're implementing them in a virtual world.
It kind of, in my opinion, goes back to like when we have our masks on and you can't see facial expressions real well. You can't read facial expressions through the messaging back and forth. So you have to rely on your other senses to do it. So they're not gonna be able to hear your tone, and they're not gonna be able to say your face. So if a kid were to kick back something to me after I said more work, and I might look at them and go, and they're gonna know, oh, okay, she means I need to really look at it. Yeah, but they can't tell that. So using, increasing your other forms of communication to get that across from where the face is lacking.
Like we try to teach our kid, use your words.
Yeah.
And now we got to tell the teachers,
Yeah.
use your words.
Sometimes they use too many words.
Yeah.
Just thinking about, yes. Yeah, Steph, I'll let you go ahead and.
Oh, no, this is you, this is kind of your thing, Lynn. I really appreciate the 8 seconds part of this. And that's what really resonates in my brain with these kids is the 8 seconds.
Yeah, if any of you have ever had a chance to listen to Tim Riley, he's a wonderful educator out of Lincoln Way, and he talks about Gen Z kids and their 8-second filter. So just really being aware that our kids today, they have, you basically get an 8-second window to either catch their attention or they're gonna toss it and move on to the next thing. So how in those first 8 seconds can you really capture their attention and capture what you are going to be working on? And then also just engaging with students, trying to think of how to, create things differently. We had a teacher that she did the Zoom with pets, and they did the dress up days, and they did the theme days, and they were doing the virtual breakout rooms, and she had almost 100% attendance every single day with her middle school classroom. I mean, that's pretty impressive when you're thinking about some of our students. So, we have to kind of be creative in how we're teaching our kids. And so there's a lot of different options out there when it comes to just being a little bit silly. And maybe it is that, everybody wears a costume on Zoom that day, but, the kid may not log in because they want to know actually what the reading passage is, but they may log in to see what Miss Mack is going to be wearing that day on Zoom. So
this is another really important one.
Yes, and I'll start here, and then we'll let Lynn take over. But I'll let Lynn. Lynn's frustrated with the term self-care.
Yeah.
And then she made a good point yesterday. When she was talking about it, she's calling it self-keeping, and there's some things about it that is sometimes that with some things that's for some things that we've noticed is kind of a selfish care, and that's different because people have a different motive for doing that. So we're referring to it as self-keeping now, and I appreciate it. But it's so important as educators that we are finding ways to take care of ourselves all the time, even more so now. And as we said earlier, a dysregulated adult cannot deal with dysregulated students. And we have to understand ourselves, and when we're there, accept it, because there are days we're going to be there. I am there a lot right now. And I've told Lynn, as I shared the other day, I told Lynn that, and I've told her, I've given her full, if I'm in a meeting and I start, that she has full right to pull me back, unless it needs to be said, then don't pull me back. But because I'm there right now, and I'm hoping here in a couple of weeks that I can get to a different level. But there are going to be days we all have those things. We have things that happen in our real life that affect us. That's where we really got to rely on our people and our own supports, so we can be the best person we can be for all these kiddos that we're trying so hard to help and learn and move forward through this time.
And as important as it is as our kids, with us adults too, I know like up here, we have the visual of the 3 R's. And if you've ever had an opportunity to read anything or hear anything or learn anything from Dr. Bruce Perry, I highly recommend it. And this is one of the takeaways that, we talk with our kids all the way from kinder up through 12, and we use as adults too. And remembering your 3 R's, and you have to regulate, relate, and reason. Before a child, you're going to get them to understand anything. And when they are in a dysregulated state, you must get them regulated. Same with adults. Before you are going to be able to comprehend or take in any sort of info or knowledge or change your behavior, you must be in a regulated state. Then once you're there using those coping skills, then you can start to relate and reason with that person or yourself and be able to move forward in that regulated state and have better outcomes. So regulate, relate, and reason. You're never going to get to reasoning with a child if they are in a dysregulated state. You can talk to them till you're blue in the face, but you are never going to get them to understand that maybe what they did was maybe not a good decision, or they should have maybe chose a different path when they are in that dysregulated state.
And for our own purposes of self-keeping, just really thinking about the things that actually help you to be at your best self so that you can help others, because that's our purpose as teachers. So limiting your time on social media and the news, especially if it's just inducing panic and fear, making sure that you're actually spending quality time with people that you enjoy being with, that you're willing to shut off, from your work. That is important. Committing to different practices. If it really makes a difference for you to take that walk every day, make sure that you're taking that walk every day. And that big thing that I keep going back to is, remember, you're human. You're not going to be 100% successful in what we have coming up. So don't dwell on your mistakes. We have to be forgiving of mistakes, especially for ourselves. We are our own worst critic. So celebrate the things that you've done well and move past the mistakes. And finally, just remember, yes, we are not all counselors and social workers, but we can all do this together.
I think this one is so huge. And I see that a lot, here in our building. Every one of our staff are willing to listen and take on whatever that child is feeling with them. But then there may come a point where it's, this is bigger than what I can do. Please, can I go and can I tell? And then it's, whether it be Lynn or Terry or myself. And we had one of our teachers used a great analogy with the kids. And I told, please keep doing that. This is wonderful. Our PE teacher has phenomenal relationships with our kids, and they would talk to her and she would explain it to them of, okay, now I need to let Mrs. White know. Mrs. White needs to talk to you. This is above, what I am trained and what I am comfortable or capable of. But look at it as, I'm the nurse, and I am, when you are sick and you walk into the doctor's office, you first describe to the nurse your symptoms and why you're there and what you're feeling. And then the nurse will get the doctor. And by no means am I comparing myself to a doctor, guys, like, calm it down. But the analogy works. Then you take it to the next step. And that person who has the more in-depth training is the one who needs to help you. And the kids really appreciate that. So it doesn't mean you can't listen. If you tell a kiddo, I don't have time, or that's not my job, or you really need, just kind of pushing them off to someone, they are going to shut down, and you're going to lose a great opportunity to connect with that kiddo and to help heal that person. So even if you're you know, oh, that may be a little outside of, at least hear them and then know who you can refer them to and do that together.
Absolutely. We are better together. That's for sure.
So this is just kind of where we're ending today. This is just a thought about the fact that, you know, ultimately when we think about our students and where we want them to be in the future, we don't necessarily say like, Rand, I really want this kid to be a mathematician, or, you know, I want this kid to be a scientist. Like, I want this kid to be a good human. You know, I want my students, wherever their path may lead, to be a good human. And so my job right now is to teach them how to be a good human. And in order for that to happen, I have to be a good human. And so seeing ourselves and our, you know, role and responsibility to our students, we are more than just a teacher. We are more than just that math teacher. We're more than just that science teacher. We're more than just that kindergarten teacher. We're teaching humans how to be humans. And there is no greater profession out there, and there's no greater reward out there. So, you know, I just really want to encourage all of you to really think about that greater good that we're doing, and step forward and just be proud of all that you've accomplished in helping make our society a better place. So that's all that I personally have. So I just want to thank you all for attending these last couple of days. It's been really helpful for me too.
Yes.
Thank you all for your time.
These have been wonderful, just having strategies to take it with us as we begin those first couple of weeks, and knowing that it's okay to take that time to build relationships, and you know, we're going to be, as we're helping these humans to understand all that they've been through and know that we're there for them, is so important. So thank you for all the strategies. I've had several people ask if they could have access to these slides. So Terry or Lynn, if you wouldn't mind emailing them to me, I'll stick them in the folder. I think this has been amazing. So please share the video with your colleagues so they can see it as well, and we'll be ready to get back to work in the fall.
Have a great start to the year, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Oh, they loved it.
I hope it's helpful for everybody, just to think about some things. So Lynn, are you able to share the
Yes.
information with Krista?